question 3 today. I'll read the entire question and I'll give you an opportunity to do your opening statement. We'll ask you some questions and give some feedback at the end, okay? I'm Ashley Pouncey. I'm an attorney at the Miami-Dade County Attorney's Office, and I'm also We the People alumni, so welcome to all of you.
Good afternoon, I'm Dan Taubman. I'm a judge on the Colorado Court of Appeals in Denver, Colorado.
Chuck Dunlap, Executive Director of the Indiana Bar Foundation in Indianapolis.
Thank you for allowing us to testify before you today. We are a unit composed of all juniors from East Grand Rapids High School. My name is Robert James.
My name is Caroline Roth.
My name is Luke Spitzley.
My name is Eve Doctor.
My name is Jack Hollis.
And my name is Maddie Meter. We're coached by the lovely Ben Langholtz and Adam Horos, and we are Unit 4.
Thank you. I'll proceed to reading question 3. When I finish, you can begin with your opening. Oversight is an implicit constitutional responsibility of Congress. It was not considered necessary to make an explicit grant of such authority in the Constitution. The power to make laws implied the power to see whether they were faithfully executed. Do you agree or disagree with historian Arthur Schlesinger Jr.? What formal powers are granted in the Constitution to Congress to hold the President and the rest of the executive branch accountable for their actions or inactions? How does congressional oversight work, and what are some of the advantages or disadvantages?
The legislature is to have inquisitorial powers which cannot safely be long kept in a state of suspension, said George Mason during a hot day in the convention in 1787. Not explicit in the Constitution, Article 1's necessary and proper clause lends credence to the implicit power of oversight given to Congress by the framers. Because of this, we strongly agree with Arthur Schlesinger Jr. that oversight is an implicit responsibility bestowed on Congress. Additionally, oversight of the executive is an integral part of ensuring the equal and even partition of power between the branches.
While oversight isn't granted explicitly, throughout the Constitution there are many checks prescribed to Congress with the sole intention of limiting the executive branch. Impeachment granted to Congress in Article 1 and defined in Article 2 is the last resort to checking the executive. Due to the supermajority required in the Senate to convict, no president has been found guilty during impeachment. However, impeachment still serves to entrench the principle of rule of law and has been used in extreme cases to remove inept officials during differing levels and branches of government.
Additionally, less extreme checks within the Constitution, such as advice and consent, overriding a veto, and appropriations form barriers on the power of the executive. Advice and consent has been proven to be the most effective check in restricting the executive branch. However, this seems to come from the divisiveness present throughout politics today and leads to many important positions being unfilled. Overriding a veto is one of Congress's weaker checks, as historically they overrode vetoes less than 5% of the time. Lastly, the check of appropriations granted in Article 1, Section 8 was a historically effective check to rein in the executive branch. However, appropriations power is waning, with earmarks gone and omnibus bills hindering its effectiveness.
Oversight, due to its implicit nature, is manifested in a wide spectrum of activities. Police patrol oversight, in contrast to firearm oversight, is a useful dichotomy to simplify complexities. Political scientist Thomas Schwartz coined the phrases and defined them as such. Police patrol oversight is the mundane surveillance on the executive branch that is active and centralized, whereas firearm oversight is decentralized and sporadically active with individuals or interest groups looking for violations by the executive branch within laws afforded to them by Congress.
Oversight's chief advantage is the ability to promote transparent and more efficient executive branch. Through the Freedom of Information Act, people and special interest groups can request information from agencies to better understand the inner workings of our government and report misconduct. President Obama remarked, FOIA should be administered with the clear presumption that in the face of doubt, openness prevails. Additionally, oversight promotes efficiency through surveillance. The Government Accountability Office, working in tandem with Congress, has conducted reports since 2003 on improper payments in the executive branch, and since its introduction, they have discovered $1.3 trillion in improper payments.
Partisanship is the most significant disadvantage of oversight. Oversight is operated in ways conducive to the aspirations of the majority party within Congress, exemplified by the usage of the subpoena power granted to the House Judiciary Committee during the Clinton and Bush administrations. President Clinton, a Democrat, had a majority Republican Congress. From 1997 to 2002, he had 1,052 subpoenas issued. Yet when President Bush took office, the same Congress only issued 3 subpoenas.
Federalist 51 states we see are particularly displayed in all the subordinate distributions of power, where the constant aim is to divide and arrange the several offices in such a manner as that each may be a check on the other. The framers intended for each branch to check one another, which is strengthened through congressional oversight. This is essential in preserving the original intent of legislation and the will of the people. Thank you, and we are now ready for your questions.
Thank you. So we know that congressional oversight means Congress being a check on the president. But I want to talk about Congress being a check on federal agencies as well. So if Congress has determined that federal agencies are not operating within their intended scope, what repercussions can Congress implement?
Well, one way that Congress can get the executive to do what they want them to do is by passing another act that redefines the duties of this federal agency. For example, in 1996, they found that the IRS was being very biased in issuing their audits, and then in 1998, they passed the IRS Restructuring Act, which kind of redefined what they wanted the IRS to do, and this was their way of enforcing what they wanted with their legislation.
Another main way to check executive agencies is through the appropriations process. So if they find misconduct or inefficiency or fraud in any specific agency, they can use the appropriations process to target that agency and reduce or change its funds.
They can always issue a subpoena against the head of an agency if they believe that the head of the agency is not doing their job, and if the head of the agency does not show up to the issued subpoena, they will be held in contempt of Congress, such as Henry Kissinger was held in contempt of Congress in 1975.
The use of social media can also play a large role in Congress trying to make the people know, or so they can know what is being, or what is not being done by the executive, and so they can tweet or post on whatever social media platform they desire, and then with the people's support, they can get the executive to do what they want.
Going off of my colleague, after the FCC announced its changes with net neutrality, multiple politicians and media members tweeted about this or talked about this, and this was a way to delay the changes and bring more accountability to the executive agencies.
So let me follow up and ask you, since you mentioned FOIA and tweets and social media, in light of all of that, the Freedom of Information Act and social media, do we need congressional oversight today?
I think congressional oversight is extremely important. The job of the legislative branch is to make laws, and they also they have the power to carry out those laws. And in order to make sure their laws that they're making are being carried out correctly, they need to have the power of oversight.
Now, I want to go back to something you mentioned in your opening, where during one presidency, about 1,500 subpoenas were issued. In a different presidency, only 3 subpoenas were issued. So are we going based on a real perception of what congressional oversight is, or just a theoretical perception that they're looking for a legitimate purpose? Is it all political?
I would say many of the more media-friendly oversight, such as investigations, is political. However, programs like the GO or the CRS, the CBO often are not political, and they spend longer time, so they have less to gain politically.
I would say that congressional oversight is used as a political weapon. When the House has a majority Democrat and there's a Republican president, there are going to be far more policy implementations and investigations than if the House were to be Republican.
However, I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. Partisan congressional oversight gets a topic put out onto the party floor, and it gets people talking about it. So while yes, it is politically motivated, it isn't always followed through with partisanship in mind. Exemplified by the 2008 Financial Inquiry Crisis Commission following the 2008 financial crisis. It was originally politically motivated due to the head of the Federal Reserve was an open libertarian, and that was not necessarily the most wanted thing within Congress at the time. They started issuing investigations against him, and then the Dodd-Frank laws came out after this commission concluded its investigations.
Going off of my colleague Caroline, recently in the 115th Congress from the years 2016 to 2018, there were only 3 subpoenas when we had a Republican president and a Republican Congress. But now that we have a Democratic House and a Republican president, there have already been 14 uses of oversight in Congress.
You mentioned the use of earmarks in the past and their role in potentially oversight. Can you talk a little bit more about what earmarks play a role, or when they were being used more actively, how that plays a role in oversight?
Yeah, so when earmarks are added to a bill and they are there to target more specific things, it allows Congress an outlet to, as I said earlier, target programs that they want to see changes with in appropriations. And And on top of the problem with earmarks gone, you have many omnibus bills that can be over 1,000 pages, and the members are usually given less than a day to read all of them. And some of these bills are submitted to the floor without the ability to make an amendment, so it's a yes or no vote, and there's a lot of pressure on the members of Congress to make sure that the government is open and running.
So if earmarks were useful and effective, why did they decide to go away from them? What
Well,
were
over
uses?
time, you can see the trend of Congress ceding authority to the executive as Congress members want less responsibility, and more Congress members spend less time focused on legislation and oversight instead of getting reelected. Currently, they spend 1/3 of the time on legislation and 2/3 of the time on getting reelected.
This less time spent on legislation is due to the extreme amount of gridlock in Congress today. Gridlock was intended within, especially the Senate when the framers wrote the Constitution, but they never expected it to be such a polarization and partisanship within this gridlock. So this gridlock today is not necessarily the liberation and cooperation the framers wanted, but rather obstructive and not necessarily helpful gridlock that is just stopping legislation from being passed.
What, if anything, has the Supreme Court said about congressional oversight?
Well, there was the case of Watkins v. U.S. The Supreme Court said that it was inherent in the legislative body to, may I please finish my statement?
You may finish your sentence.
Where it was inherent in the legislative body to investigate.
Thank you. You guys showed a great depth of knowledge. I know you answered all of my questions. I think you answered all of the questions that we posed very well. Even a lot of times with 6 of you on the panel, it's difficult for everyone to get their views out, but you played very well off of each other as if it was one person talking, you know, and even when you disagreed, you both had good points in favor of the advantages and disadvantages of whatever the question was. I also like that for each question you had an example, and that's where the depth of knowledge came in. That was very impressive. Also, when he's asking about the earmarks, you knew all the entire process. You were ready to answer whatever question that he had coming. So I think you guys did a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, so just on that, you know, this is, how many have we heard? We've heard a few of these so far. That was the first time I'd heard that, so I thought, you know, that's an interesting perspective. Let's follow up on that. And it was clear that wasn't just a throwaway line just thrown in there. I mean, there was, and it was an excellent discussion of how that had been used, and some other issues that, you know, why it isn't used now. So I thought that was very well done. Again, it shows the depth of knowledge. If we had more time, you've heard this before, I'm sure, but you know, it would have been great to continue our conversations. You had excellent examples. And some of the, you know, the other thing too, it seems pretty basic, but you answered the questions. That doesn't always happen. And so when you do that, and you show the depth of knowledge, that's particularly impressive. And some of the basic things too, you know, they have the check on the agencies because the law is superior to the regulations that are in place, and they're supposed to be, you know, enacting the laws as opposed to creating new laws and going beyond those. They can change the law, right? So I mean, you covered that really well, and it's clear that you knew the process, the more nitty-gritty kind of in the weeds processes that are implicated here. So very nice job.
Thank you.
I thought you had some good information. You gave us some information we haven't heard from other hearings, like the differences in the numbers of subpoenas that have been issued under different administrations, which I thought was good. I like the fact that you mentioned federal is 51 in your opening statement. You had some good information suggesting that there were some more neutral bodies. You started with the alphabet soup, talking about GAO, CRS, and there was another one that I didn't write down, but you might have stated what they stand for instead of just using the initials. Because CRS, I assume you mean Congressional Research Service. In Colorado, that's Colorado Revised Statutes. So if you, in the future, just saying what the acronym stands for, I think is helpful. But the point that you were making with that, I think, was an excellent point, that there are some less political ways that Congress has been exercising congressional oversight. So I think overall you did a really nice job.
Thank you.
Congratulations.